Welcome to the Science and Spirituality Podcast, where we dive deep into universal spiritual principles and ground them in modern science. My name is Chris Carden.
And my name is Kevin Carden. And we are committed to simplifying the spiritual side of success for you with easy to understand scientific research so you can walk away with practical tools to create radical transformations in your life. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Science and Spirituality Podcast. And this is a special episode because the topic that we chose today was a question that one of our listeners had written in. So appreciate you and you'll know who you are who wrote this in. So the question came as this: I feel like I listen to or read so many inspirational resources that sometimes I feel like I jump from one resource to another, and that I'm not able to retain even the aha moments I get. So the question is, what is the best way to balance learning and living it out?
And this is a really great question, because I feel like it really touches on the gap between like knowing about something and then truly knowing it once you actually put it into practice and start seeing results. And something that Maston Kipp says, he calls it spiritual entertainment, where we kind of get caught in reading a bunch of stuff and listening to a bunch of stuff, and it makes us feel good that we're actually kind of, attempting to better our lives. But then, after we listen to it, we get that spike of feeling good, and then we go back to doing our normal day lives until we need that hit again of, just listening to something or reading something and not really getting a chance to actually practice it. So this is something that I feel also that I've struggled with, and Kev, I know that you've struggled with too, like in our journeys of, like, because we started this a few years ago at least, and it's still kind of like that interplay. So it's definitely a super important question.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like everyone struggles with this at some time in their own development, personal development, spiritual development. I think it's actually necessary, because you'll never discover that balance or the harmony that can be achieved and experienced between, learning something and then actually living it out. Because I believe in the very beginning, when we first start diving into this information, like, we consume everything because it's so new to us. Mm-hmm. And we need to get an intellectual understanding of the concepts first, because that's how we assimilate information. We understand it through our minds, through our brain power, and then the practicality of it and then practicing it is what really integrates it. But the first part is usually just like a lot of learning. And then, there's got to be a balance, of course, of taking action. So first off, I want to say is it's normal, very normal, and to not beat yourself up for noticing that. It's just, I believe everyone will have their own balance of it. I don't think there's a way of saying like, okay, read one book a month and apply what you learned the next month. Like, I don't believe that there is a formula for that. I think the formula comes from what you feel intuitively guided to do. The person asking this question, you're at a place in your spiritual development where you're realizing that you're consuming maybe not too much information, but you're consuming information without the application of it. And now you're feeling that lack of results or lack of really integrating what you're learning. So now it's the time for discovery of what that looks like to you in terms of how you apply it and what that looks like for you. So I know it's super general, but and it's like, it depends on the person, depends on the situation. But honestly, I feel like, most questions are answered that way. And I'm down. We'll go into a couple of unique details because I have some in my mind. But with all that shit, I want to hear what your thoughts are, Chris.
Yeah, no, okay. I think it's good that you touched on that. And the way I like to refer to it is like the bio-individuality of this stuff. Because you see that in every aspect of life. Like, not one diet's good for a person. Not one exercise routine is good for a person. So it's important to check in. And this is also part of the spiritual development, is learning how to check in with yourself.
Yeah.
And understanding, like, listening to those intuitive kind of thoughts and those ideas that you have inside to, do I need to read more or do I not need to read more? And should I start practicing? And I think like some people might need to get a broad range of like a bunch of different topics and then synthesize it into certain actions. And then some people might read something and be like, okay, I'm putting this into action right away.
Yeah.
So definitely is like super important, because I've noticed that on my journey where there'll be times where I'll be reading for like 3-4 months, and then I'll be like, yo, I mean, I feel like I'm reading a lot of the same stuff over and over again. Like maybe it's time to actually take a look at where I can apply this in my life.
Yeah.
And so I kind of look at it like as math class. So, like in math class, like in the first, like when you have a class, like in the very beginning, like you learn the basic concepts of how to do certain things. And then you go home for homework and you get all these like more difficult questions of
Mm-hmm.
actually practicing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's kind of how it is.
Mm.
It's like you need to learn the basics of it, but then you need to actually go home and start to practice it. And then there's always going to be that adjustment process when you start practicing too, where it's like some things, some areas you might be able to see where it can apply easily into your life, but then other areas it might be a little harder, and that's when you kind of have to go back and rework.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also important to be aware of. There's a syndrome that is very captivating at this level of development. Is the "I know that" syndrome.
Yep.
Meaning, you're reading something like you mentioned, Chris. Like it's like you feel like you've read like the same thing, like same concept, and you weren't applying it. But there's a tendency that happens when we understand something intellectually. Then we say, "Oh, I know that." But if our life is not reflecting it, then we actually only know about it, as you began with, Chris. So like it's knowing the actual information by the results in your life. Um, it's like an analogy I think of from the Bible. It's like by their fruits you will know them, meaning
Yeah.
the fruits of your labor or the fruits of like a tree, like the actual results is the evidence of whether or not you have really integrated it in your life. So it's again self-reflection, looking back, knowing yourself of how you assimilate information best. Because for me, I can't read a couple of books at once. I've actually tried, and
Mm,
that, to my own detriment, because again I was at that place like you, like I was a couple months in, I was like, wait a minute, I haven't really been applying this stuff. So like
yeah.
I adjusted, and now it's like one book at a time, and I really reflect. A question you can ask yourself as you're reading or as you're listening to um, different information to develop and expand your life is asking yourself, how can I apply this? It's so simple, but unless we ask the question, the answers won't be there.
Mm,
I'm going to say that again because it's really important. It's such a simple concept, but it's not easy to implement. Is you must ask yourself a specific question of what result you want. So, how do I apply this while you're reading, while you're listening, and then listen for answers? Give yourself space. I think that's another important topic, which I want to touch on again too. But I'll wrap it up here. But again, like giving yourself the space to listen for answers and then be willing to implement. Maybe even using your calendar and like your schedule to put it into place, like put it into action.
yeah.
How you're going to change your life.
Mhm. Yeah, just to highlight the bio individuality of this, for me, I actually kind of have book ADD, where I'll be reading like 3 or 4 books at one time, and that works for me
Mm-hmm.
because I'll read a few chapters and get the concept, and then I'll move on to something else, and I'll kind of come back, and yeah, so that's the way I work.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to bring up something too, just to kind of bring something. So I don't know if you ever heard of this before. It's called Edgar Dale's Cone of Experience,
No.
and he basically talks about like how we learn and like how much of stuff we retain based on the modality of what we're doing.
Mm. I
And
think
so
I didn't know the guy's name, but I know what you're
yeah,
talking about now.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so just to give some perspective to this, it's like I'm going to read it out right now. So basically, we only retain 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, 50% of what we see and hear at the same time. So like watching like a demonstration,
Mm-hmm.
70% of what we say or write, and then 90% of what we do. So you can
Mm.
just look at this cone of experience here and see where you are at in that cone. Because if you're just in the point where you're reading a bunch of stuff, you're probably in the read and hear part, the very beginning of
Yeah.
actually knowing and understanding something. So, I mean, just going by this cone, maybe something that people can do to kind of deepen their knowledge is to write it out, or
Yeah.
kind of do what we're doing right
Journal.
now. Yeah, like we have a podcast, we're talking about it. And I
Yep.
feel like this deepens our knowledge. So this is something that we do as well, that, it helps people that are listening, but it also helps us because we get to chat about this stuff and see what we really know and expand on our ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, the very bottom of the pyramid, 90% of what you do, you remember. So that's the real key is the application of it and the practicing of it.
Hmm.
So yeah, and just if you ever know anyone wants to look this up, Edgar Dale's Cone of Experience. It's pretty interesting.
Cone, as in CONE, right?
Yeah, cone. Yeah,
Got it. Like an ice cream cone. Got
yeah.
it.
Or even like if you type in the learning pyramid, it comes up too. It seems like it's a
Yeah.
pretty well studied thing. So just to
Yep.
kind of ground this in some science of what people might
Great.
be going through. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to bring it back to the person who asked the question, because the very beginning of it, and this may be an experience of other people who are listening, so I want to hone in on it. I relate with this. This person said was that I feel like I listen to or read so many inspirational resources that sometimes I feel like I jump from one resource to another that I'm not able to retain. So
Mm,
it seems like an opposite. It seems like the way I learn, whereas it's opposite for you, Chris, where you have several different things going on and that actually works for you. So my suggestion for that is to choose one thing. Again, there's you'll have your own knowing of how much time to invest, but into this one thing. But for example, like pick one book or pick one audio, or for example, this podcast. Like I encourage, like when I work with my clients, they go through one program for 3 months straight.
mm,
So it's a focus. There's a rhythm that happens when you focus your attention, just like a laser is just focused light. You take the same light from an incandescent bulb, it turns into a laser with a bit more power probably, but then you can cut through steel.
yeah.
So, and we've all done that as a kid where we had a magnifying glass, we magnified the sun's rays and like burnt a leaf.
Mhm,
Like it's power. Power comes from focus. And
yeah.
so choosing something and then giving your attention to it for a certain amount of time will help you in that, so
Yeah,
that
and
then you can retain the aha moments.
I was gonna say, don't be afraid to reread books. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because, dude, in the very beginning, that's kind of how I was. I would just wanted to consume everything, and I kind of
Yeah.
like I felt proud that I read like 10 books, but I read the book so fast that I didn't really pick out something that I could practice from it.
Yep.
And so you mean there's different types like and levels of reading. Like you can read something and not retain anything, or you could really focus, like you said,
Yep.
and go into it line by line and paragraph by paragraph, and even reread some chapters. Like
Hmm.
the Science of Getting Rich challenge we did. Like we read that book every day for 90 days, like the same
Yep.
chapters.
Yep.
And there's like a different level of mastery that comes when you start doing that, and it sinks in so much that you almost have to start living it or acting by it. You know what I mean? Because it,
Yep.
it changes your awareness about it. So don't be afraid to reread books and just really get into the details.
Yeah. Repetition is the mother of all skill, according to Tony Robbins.
Nice.
So it's so key. So anything else do you want to add about that? Because it's a very straightforward topic.
Yeah,
We just provided some suggestions and everything, but yeah.
I mean, just to kind of bring it home to maybe something practical. Like if you really do feel like you're struggling and jumping from resource to resource, like pick a resource and then pick an action step and then just apply it for 21 to 30 days.
Hmm.
Because 21 to 30 days is the scientifically proven like measure of like what starts to build a habit. And then I think it takes like 90 days to like 12 months to build a lifestyle out of something.
Mm.
Just kind
Hmm.
of like give an action step a chance for 21 days. And the best part about that is like you don't have to commit to it doing it for a year. Like I think a lot like so let's say you want to like maybe start working out or you want to start whatever. Commit to it for 21 days. If it sucks after 21 days, you can at least say that you tried it for 21 days. So kind of give yourself that window, but then also give yourself an out almost so that it encourages you to do it more.
Yeah.
And that's like something that's more practical, especially if you feel stuck.
Yeah, definitely. I want to bring, because the question was about inspirational resources like that. I
Mhm.
know you use the example of working out, which is much more practical, but I just thought of an example just to bring it into that. It's like, okay, like a very common principle is that, and if you feel fear, like do it anyway, because fear is just a border of the reality that we've known. So if you feel fear and you know it's a step you want to take it anyway. Do that for 21 days.
Yeah.
Take a step you're afraid to take every single day, no matter how small it is.
Or even if it's not
Sure.
fear, like also some discomfort.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause with the working out, there's probably not a fear involved, but there
Yeah.
might be some discomfort where it's like, I don't want to wake up. Like, I don't want to move my body in this way. So fear and discomfort, as long as it's like in the realm of safety
Yep.
overall, that like it's a good measure of like, hey, like this is probably something I should give a shot and try.
Yeah. For sure. So, with that said, let's end the episode. I think that's pretty
Yeah.
straightforward. Let's land
Yeah,
it.
that was awesome.
Go take action. And that's it for today. So thanks for tuning in, and we really hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. So any questions, any comments, just connect with us on Instagram. You could always DM us at Kevin Francis Carton
and at Chris J. Carton. And also, if you feel guided to, the one thing we do ask is for you to please rate the podcast and leave us a review. This way we can reach more people and impact more lives with this amazing information. With that, we'll see you on the next episode.